October 1740, Charles VI dies, leaving the throne to Mary Theresa. Frederick II of Prussia decides to exploit this Austrian weakness and begins to mobilise his forces in November. His army enters Silesia in December 1740, occupying a large chunk of the province. An Austrian army under von Neidberg enters Silesia in February 1741. Frederick retreats and manages to avoid this Austrian force, but on April the 9th, 20,000 strong Austrian force was camped around the town of Mollwitz. Frederick manoeuvres around Neidberg and appears to his rear. After a hard-fought battle, the Prussian infantry win the day by breaking the Austrian centre. This victory is crucial as it encourages France, Bavaria, Spain and Naples to join Prussia. In October 1741, Frederick signs a ceasefire with the Austrians. This allows him to focus on the French, but in January 1742, Frederick breaks this accord and moves his army towards a large Austrian force in the area. These forces meet for the Second Battle of the First Silesian War on 17th of May 1742. On May the 15th, Frederick left camp with the Prussian advance guard and marched west, leaving the main body of his army to follow the next day under Prince Leopold. Frederick came across an Austrian camp which he believed was just a small force, but to his surprise it was the main Prussian force, 30,000 troops under Charles of Lorraine. Charles's army was set up with two infantry lines in the centre, supported by artillery and cavalry on both flanks. He also had a small force of Pandols screaming to his front. Frederick at the start of the battle only had 9 battalions and a single artillery battery deployed around the town of Chotusitz, and Brodinwitz's cavalry to the west. The rest of his force was still in column, en route to the battlefield. At around 7 AM, the battle begins, as around 1,000 Pandols and 16 Austrian guns begin to weaken down the small Prussian formation to the west of Chotusitz. On the far west of the battlefield, Brodinwitz's cavalry begins to charge towards their Austrian counterparts, forcing parts of the Austrian Pandols to fall back rather than be overrun. In the rear, the main Prussian column begins to form up at the base of the hill. Both Prussian and Austrian cavalry wings on the western side of the battlefield are forced to pull back to reform, with neither side being able to gain an advantage. At around 9 AM, Daun's attack on Chotusitz begins, and scores early success in forcing part of the Prussian defence to crumble, but they are unable to push Peter's infantry brigade off of Chotusitz. More problems arise for Daun as the Prussian cavalry on his right begins to form up for an attack. After around 40 minutes of repeated attack, Daun finally manages to force the Prussians to the west of the town into a retreat, but struggles to push the detachment in the town out. Daun urgently reforms for another attack, knowing he is running out of time before the main Prussian line forms up. Unfortunately for him, Charles still has not sent an order for the Austrian second line to form up to Daun's rear. After repeated attacks on Chotusitz, Daun finally manages to force the Prussian infantry back from the town. To his rear, Liechtenstein begins to form his cavalry to support Daun's threatened flank. Daun manages to reform his infantry to the west of the town, but then comes under attack from Prussian guns to the north, as Frederick prepares for this assault. His first line consists of 6 Prussian Grenadier battalions and 6 line battalions, some of the finest troops his army has to offer. To Daun's right, the Prussian cavalry assaults Liechtenstein's cavalry wing, and a few Austrian battalions to the east of Chotusitz. The Austrian infantry hold firm, repelling the Prussian cavalry. In confused fighting through rough and marshy ground, both Austrian and Prussian cavalry fail to gain any breakthrough and are forced to fall back to reform, both heavily fatigued from the fighting. In the centre, Charles orders his second line forward to support Daun. Daun attempts to shift a couple of battalions down to the west of his line to prepare for the Prussian onslaught. Frederick, meanwhile, rides over to his far right wing to give Brandenburg order to attack in person and helps to reform his cavalry. Frederick desperately needs to pin down the Austrian left flank to support his attack in the centre. The fighting in the centre begins at about 10:30. The Austrian infantry stand their ground, supported by 16 heavy guns to the rear, but are unable to contend with the fire discipline of the superior Prussian infantry, and after just 30 minutes of musketry, are forced to retreat behind their second line. Frederick immediately orders the Prussian infantry to push their advance, hoping to use the momentum to break the Austrian army. After quickly reforming, they push towards the Austrian second line. With the grenadiers leading the charge, they capture both Austrian batteries before engaging the infantry. To the west, after almost an hour of delays, Charles finally managed to get his cavalry wing to attack Brandenburg's weakened force. To Frederick's surprise, his outnumbered cavalry to the west managed to gain a breakthrough, outflanking a number of Austrian cavalry squadrons and forcing the whole wing to fall back beyond the stream. Unfortunately, they are unable to follow, as they have also taken heavy losses. The race in the centre continues as the Austrian infantry desperately tried to hold the grenadiers at bay after having 2 battalions rout in a matter of minutes. The Austrian hussars on the left failed to cause an impact, but it's a different story on the right, as 2 squadrons of Austrian cuirassiers run down 2 Prussian infantry battalions before they are driven off. Finally, after an hour of fighting in the centre, both sides are sent back, battered and bruised. The Austrian cavalry to the east are also forced back, after an attempted pursuit which is stopped by Prussian artillery on the high ground. The Prussian infantry safely retreat behind their untouched second line. Charles is forced to order a retreat, after all of his flanks are forced back. As Frederick holds the field, he is victorious. His army has suffered just under 4,000 casualties, compared to the Austrians' 5,600 casualties. This victory will force the Austrians to enter the Treaty of Breslau, bringing an end to the First Silesian War. This pause in hostilities would only last till 1744. Thanks for watching this AR, guys. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments. I'll try and get back to anyone that does. Also, as I know you all gamers love your rule sets, I thought I'd explain what I'm using, why I'm using it. So I'm using a rule that's called ESR, or Estance Resulta, which is by the Wargaming company based in the States. Overall, fantastic level game. It's kind of like a grand tactical game. It's highly detailed, and yet it's very quick to play. And overall, the scale kind of fits in with what I like, which is the battalion level, but also kind of scaled up. So you're kind of at the high level of command rather than at a brigade or a divisional level. You're generally at the corps or army commander level. And overall, it has a very big emphasis on the command phase and how commanders affect their formations, which is one of the reasons why I love this rule set. If you guys want another video on me going into more detail on the little changes that I've done for this to do these games, or just overall what I think of the rule set and a little review of the book, then just let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll get back to you with the next one.